I always believed my life was solid, predictable, steady, secure. The kind of life you work for, build brick by brick, until it stands tall like a fortress against the chaos of the world. My name is Daniel Carter. I'm 42 years old, a structural engineer, and for the last 15 years, I've been married to Laura. We have 2 kids, Mason, 12, and Ella, 9, both of whom I adore beyond words. Laura and I met in college. She was this sharp, witty literature major who could tear apart any argument I made with just a well-placed quote from Shakespeare or Austen. I fell for her fast and hard, and somehow, she fell for me too. Or at least, that's what I thought. For the most part, our life was good. We weren't the perfect couple, but we worked well together. I handled the practical side of things, bills, house maintenance, the tedious responsibilities of adulthood, while she brought warmth and spontaneity into our home. She worked part-time at a publishing house, always talking about the books she was editing and the authors she admired. Things were normal. We had our routines. Mornings were a rush of making breakfast, getting the kids ready for school, and Laura leaving for work while I headed to my office downtown. Evenings were calmer, dinner together, kids' homework, TV time. Then bed. That was our cycle, day in and day out. But looking back, there were cracks in the foundation. It started small. Laura was always on her phone, more than usual. I'd ask who she was texting, and she'd say it was just her book club or work friends. Nothing unusual. Except, she'd laugh at her screen sometimes, in that way you do when someone says something that makes you feel special. Not the way she laughed at my jokes. Then there were the nights out. At first, it was just once a month, some girls' night with friends. But then it became twice, 3 times, then once a week. She always had a reason: celebrating a co-worker's promotion, a last-minute dinner with an old friend, networking events. The first time I really felt uneasy was 2 weeks ago. It was a Saturday. She had gone out for drinks with work colleagues, which, at first, seemed reasonable. But when I called home around 10:30 p.m. and she still wasn't back, something gnawed at me. Then there was the phone thing. 3 times in the past month, I had picked up a call from an unknown number, only to hear silence before the caller abruptly hung up. It wasn't like we had prank callers or wrong numbers before. But the real kicker? The missing necklace. Laura had this silver necklace with a tiny heart pendant, something I gave her on our 10th anniversary. She wore it every day. I found it tucked into the back of her jewelry drawer one evening, hidden under some old receipts. When I asked why she wasn't wearing it, she just shrugged and said, "I forgot." Laura never forgot things like that. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe I was reading too much into things. But something inside me was whispering, something is wrong. I decided not to say anything. Not yet. Instead, I started watching. And I was about to learn just how much I had been blind to. There's a moment when you realize that everything you believed in, the life you built, the love you trusted, might be a lie. It doesn't hit all at once. It creeps in slowly, like a shadow stretching across a room as the sun sets. And once it takes hold, it doesn't let go. That moment came for me on a Tuesday. Laura had been acting strange for weeks, and I had done my best to push my suspicions aside. Maybe she was just going through something. Maybe work was stressful. Maybe I was overthinking everything. But deep down, I knew. And on that Tuesday, I found the proof. It started with a simple mistake. Laura had left her laptop open on the kitchen counter. That alone was unusual. She was always careful about shutting it down when she wasn't using it. Almost like she had something to hide. I wasn't planning to snoop. I swear I wasn't. But as I passed by, something caught my eye, a message notification in the bottom corner of the screen. "Miss you already. Can't stop thinking about last night. Red heart." The name next to it was just an initial, J. My stomach dropped. For a second, I stood there, frozen, my brain scrambling to come up with some kind of explanation. A joke? A wrong number? A message meant for someone else? But deep down, I already knew that wasn't the case. I reached for the laptop, my hands shaking. The message had popped up on some chat app one didn't recognize. The kind that didn't keep logs. The kind that vanished when you closed it. I clicked on it. The screen blinked, asking for a password. I tried Laura's usual one. No luck. I tried our wedding date. Nope. I tried the kids' birthdays. Still nothing. That's when the cold, hard truth slammed into me. She had changed it. Laura never changed her passwords. She wasn't tech-savvy, and she always used the same combinations. The fact that she had set up something new, something separate, meant only one thing. She was hiding something. And I was going to find out what. The search for proof. I closed the laptop and walked away, my heart pounding in my ears. I needed a plan. The problem was, I had no proof. A single message wasn't enough. If I confronted her now, she'd just lie, spin some excuse. I needed something undeniable. So I started watching more closely. That night, I pretended everything was normal. I kissed her goodnight, told her I loved her, and then lay awake staring at the ceiling while she slept beside me. The next morning, I checked her phone while she was in the shower. Locked. No surprise there. Then I checked her car. Laura had a habit of stuffing receipts and papers into the center console. She always said she'd clean it out later, but she never did. And sure enough, buried under some old grocery lists and fast food napkins, I found it. A folded-up hotel receipt. Riverside Inn. One night. Paid in cash. The date was last Friday, the same night she had told me she was working late. My hands clenched into fists. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. It was real. It was really happening. The moment of truth. I didn't go to work that day. I called in sick and spent the morning staring at the receipt, my mind spinning. Who was Jay? How long had this been going on? Had she ever felt guilty? Or had she been lying to me for months, maybe years? By noon, I couldn't take it anymore. I needed more proof. I drove to the Riverside Inn. The place was small, tucked away on the edge of town. The kind of motel people used for affairs because it was out of the way, discreet. I felt sick just pulling into the parking lot. I went inside, walked up to the front desk, and forced a casual smile. Hey, my wife thinks she left something here last Friday. Room 214? Mind if I check? The guy at the desk barely looked up. Sorry, sir. We can't let anyone into the rooms without ID. Of course, I said. Could you at least tell me if she was here? I mean, if she checked in? Her name's Laura Carter. He frowned, glancing at the computer. I can't give out guest info, sir. I reached into my wallet and slid a $50 bill across the counter. He sighed, pocketed the cash, and clicked a few keys. Yeah, she was here. Checked in at 7:42 p.m. Left early the next morning. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Was she alone? He hesitated. I didn't see her come in. But the cameras, look, man, I really can't say more. That told me everything I needed to know. I left without another word. As I walked back to my car, my legs felt heavy, like I was wading through cement. This was it. No more doubts. No more maybe she's just going through something. No more excuses. Laura had cheated on me. And now I had to decide what to do about it. Shock, denial, and the slow realization. I sat in my car for almost an hour, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. Part of me wanted to scream. Part of me wanted to cry. Mostly, I just felt numb. This was my wife. The woman I had built a life with. The mother of my children. And she had thrown it all away for some Jay. I tried to remember the last time she had told me she loved me. Really loved me. Not just out of habit, but because she meant it. I couldn't. Somewhere along the way, she had stopped. And I had been too blind to see it. I thought about the kids. About how this would break their world apart. I thought about confronting her that night. About throwing the receipt in her face, demanding answers. But then I remembered the look on the hotel clerk's face when I asked if she was alone. I remembered the way Laura had laughed at her phone. I remembered the J. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This wasn't some drunken accident. This was a choice. A deliberate, premeditated choice. And if she had chosen him over me, then I had to make my own choice. One way or another, this was war. Betrayal doesn't hit you like a single gunshot. It's more like being stabbed, over and over again, each new revelation twisting the knife a little deeper. I had spent the entire night replaying everything in my head, every conversation, every excuse, every moment I had ignored the signs. But now, there was no ignoring it. Laura had cheated. And tonight, she was going to face me. A plan in motion. I spent most of the day strategizing. I needed to be calm, methodical. If I walked in guns blazing, she'd just get defensive. I wanted the truth, the whole truth, and I wanted her to admit it. But I wasn't going to just ask. No. I was going to make her say it without giving her a chance to deny it. So I prepared. I printed the hotel receipt and placed it in an envelope. Then, I grabbed an old USB voice recorder from my office and tucked it into my shirt pocket. I wanted everything documented, every lie, every half-hearted excuse. And for the final touch? I called Laura's best friend, Megan. Megan and Laura had been close since college, but Megan and I had always been friendly too. If anyone knew anything, it was her. The phone rang 3 times before she picked up. "Hey, Dan. What's up?" Her voice was cheerful, oblivious. I kept my tone neutral. "Hey, Meg. Quick question. Do you know if Laura made it home okay last Friday?" A slight pause. Yeah. I think so." "Why?" "I don't know. She said she was with you. I just wanted to make sure." Another pause, longer this time. "Oh, right. Yeah, she was with me." Bullshit. Megan was a terrible liar. I forced a chuckle. Weird, because I checked with the hotel she was at, and they confirmed she was checked in there all night. Paid in cash, too. Silence. "Megan?" She exhaled. "Dan, look, I don't know what to say. I don't want to get in the middle of this. That ship has sailed." My voice was cold now. "You knew, didn't you?" She sighed. "Dan, she's my best friend." That's not an answer. She said it wasn't serious. That she was confused. That's all I know, I swear. That was enough. I didn't need Megan to say any more. If Laura had told her anything, it meant this wasn't some one-night mistake. It had been going on for a while. And she had lied to my face. I hung up without another word. Now I was ready. The showdown. Laura got home around 6:30 p.m., carrying a grocery bag in one hand and her purse in the other. She was humming softly, like it was just another day. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the envelope in front of me. The house was eerily quiet. The kids were at my sister's for the weekend. Perfect. She barely glanced at me as she set the groceries on the counter. "Hey, babe. You okay? Sit down." She frowned. "What?" I gestured to the chair across from me. "Sit down." Something in my voice must have told her this wasn't a normal conversation, because she hesitated before finally sliding into the seat. I let the silence hang for a moment before pushing the envelope toward her. "What's this?" she asked, her voice wary. "Open it." She did. And the moment she saw the hotel receipt, her face went pale. Her lips parted, but no words came out. I leaned forward. "Explain." She swallowed. Dan, Don't lie, I cut in. Don't insult me with bullshit. Just tell me the truth. She closed her eyes for a moment, then let out a shaky breath. It's not what you think. I slammed my fist against the table, making her jump. Do not start with that. Tears welled in her eyes. Dan, please. Who is Jay? She flinched at the name. That told me everything. I exhaled slowly, gripping the edge of the table to keep myself from throwing the damn thing across the room. How long? Laura shook her head. It's not like that. I let out a bitter laugh. Really? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks exactly like that. She bit her lip, shaking her head again. It didn't mean anything. Wrong answer. I leaned in, voice low. You don't risk a 15-year marriage for something that didn't mean anything. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Dan, I'm so sorry. Sorry? I repeated, my voice cold. You're sorry? Sorry for what? Getting caught? She wiped her face. No. I was going to end it. I laughed again, but it sounded hollow. Right. That's why you were still lying about it. She stared at me, searching for something, maybe sympathy, maybe forgiveness. But I had nothing left to give. Finally, I asked the question I had been dreading. Do you love him? She hesitated. Just for a second. But a second was enough. Something inside me broke. I pushed my chair back and stood up. We're done. Her eyes widened. Dan, please. Don't say that. We can work through this. I scoffed. We? You mean me. I can work through what you did. That's what you mean, right? She reached for my hand, but I pulled away. Dan, I made a mistake. A mistake? My voice cracked. A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk. This was a choice. She was sobbing now, but I felt nothing. I turned away. Pack a bag. You can stay at Megan's tonight. Dan, please. We have kids, we have a life. I turned back, my voice ice cold. You should have thought of that before you fucked Jay. Aftermath. She left that night. I didn't sleep. I just sat in the silence of the house we built together, staring at nothing. The next morning, I called a divorce lawyer. I didn't tell the kids yet. That would come later. For now, I just let the reality sink in. The life I thought I had? Gone. The woman I thought I knew? A stranger. And the love I thought was real? A lie. But this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Because now, it was time for revenge. The night after Laura left, the house felt impossibly quiet. I sat in the darkened living room, replaying every second of our confrontation, every word she had stammered out, every tear she had shed. I should have felt something: anger, sadness, relief, but I didn't. I felt nothing. I had spent 15 years building this life with her, trusting her, loving her. And she had thrown it away for Jay. Who the hell was he? That question burned in my mind like an open flame. Laura hadn't told me much, but I was done waiting for answers. I was going to find them myself. And when I did, I was going to make them both pay. Gathering the evidence. The next morning, I started digging. Laura had left her laptop behind. I powered it up, expecting it to be locked, but she had left herself logged into her email. Big mistake. I searched her inbox for anything suspicious. At first, there was nothing. Then I noticed a folder labeled Work Documents. Inside, there were no documents, just emails. Emails from Jay. His full name was James Whitmore. He worked with her at the publishing house. And they had been seeing each other for months. The messages were nauseating, long, emotional confessions about how much he loved her, how much he wished she would leave me for him. I clenched my fists so tightly that my nails dug into my palms. She had told me it didn't mean anything. But here it was, in her own words. I think about you every second I'm away from you. I don't know how to tell Dan. I don't want to hurt him. I need to see you again. Soon. I scrolled through them, my pulse pounding. Then, near the bottom, I found photos. Some of them were innocent selfies, pictures of their lunches together. But then, as I kept scrolling, my stomach dropped. There they were. Pictures of her, half-dressed, smiling. Pictures of him, shirtless in what looked like a hotel room. I wanted to throw the laptop across the room. Instead, I saved everything. Screenshots. Emails. Photos. I wasn't going to let her lie her way out of this. And as for James? He had no idea what was coming. Introducing myself to James. I found him on Facebook easily enough. His profile was public, filled with pictures of himself hiking, drinking craft beer, and looking like an all-around pretentious asshole. He was 38, unmarried, and based on his LinkedIn profile, had been working at the publishing house for 3 years. I clicked through his photos, my jaw tightening. Then I found her. Laura. In the background of a company party, standing next to him. Smiling. I had probably been home with the kids that night, trusting her when she said she had to stay late for work. I needed to see this guy in person. I needed to look him in the eye. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I scheduled a meeting with him. I used a fake email, pretending to be an aspiring author who wanted to publish a book. The guy took the bait immediately, setting up a meeting at a coffee shop near his office. I got there first. Sat by the window, waiting. At exactly 3 p.m., he walked in. James was exactly what I expected: tall, fit, a little too well-dressed for a guy in publishing. He scanned the room, looking for me. I stood up and walked straight toward him. James. He looked confused for a second. Then, recognition hit. Do I know you? I smiled. You know my wife. His face went pale. I think you have the wrong person. I pulled out my phone and opened one of the photos. The color drained from his face. You still think I have the wrong person? James swallowed hard. He took a step back. Look, man, I don't want any trouble. I chuckled. Trouble? No, James. I'm not here to fight you. I took a step closer. I'm here to ruin you. He blinked. What? I kept my voice low, calm. Controlled. I have every email. Every message. Every photo. I let that sink in. And I'm going to send them to your boss. Your clients. Your family. Hell, I might even publish them myself. His eyes widened. Dude, you can't. I leaned in. Watch me. James looked like he was about to piss himself. Please, man. Please. Don't do this. I tilted my head. Why not? You weren't thinking about my life when you were screwing my wife. I swear, it wasn't like that. I smiled. No? Then what was it? Silence. He had nothing to say. I turned to leave, but before I walked away, I gave him one final warning. Stay the hell away from her. And pray I don't change my mind about destroying you. Then I walked out, leaving James standing there like a deer in headlights. The divorce papers. The next day, I met with my lawyer. I had already decided I wasn't going to stay in this marriage. Laura had made her choice, and now it was time for me to make mine. My lawyer looked through the evidence I had collected and let out a low whistle. This is substantial, he said. I nodded. I want full custody of the kids. I don't want her taking them anywhere near that guy. He frowned. That might be difficult unless you can prove she was negligent. I pulled out my phone and showed him the emails where she admitted to sneaking around during family events. He smiled. This helps. By the time I left his office, the divorce papers were officially in motion. And Laura had no idea what was coming. Laura's breakdown. I served her the papers 2 days later. She showed up at the house, looking exhausted. Her hair was a mess, her eyes red from crying. Dan, please, can we talk? I handed her the envelope. She opened it. Read it. Then she looked at me, shocked. You're filing for divorce? I stared at her. What did you expect? Tears welled in her eyes. Dan, I made a mistake. You made a choice. She shook her head. We can fix this. I still love you. I laughed. Laughed. You don't love me, Laura. You love the idea of me. You love the life I built for you. I leaned in. But you threw it away. And now? You're going to live with that. She sobbed. What about the kids? They're staying with me. She shook her head. No, Dan, we can't do this to them. You did this to them. And with that, I walked away. The end of us. Laura tried to fight the divorce at first. But with all the evidence I had, she didn't stand a chance. By the time everything was finalized, she had lost everything: her marriage, her home, her reputation. And me? I walked away with my dignity. My kids. And my freedom. She made her choice. And I made mine. Laura had always been good with words. That's what made her a great editor, a great conversationalist, and for a long time, a great wife. But words wouldn't save her now. It had been a month since I served her the divorce papers, and the reality of her situation was finally hitting her. The initial bravado, the pleading, the promises, the tears had faded into something else: desperation. She had tried to fight it at first, tried to convince me that we could work through it, that we owed it to the kids, that she had just been confused. But that was the thing about betrayal: once the trust was gone, there was nothing left to rebuild. And I wasn't interested in reconstruction. Laura's desperate attempt. She showed up at the house one evening, unannounced. I had just put the kids to bed when I heard the knock. I knew it was her before I even opened the door. Laura stood there, looking like she hadn't slept in days. Her hair was unkempt, her face pale, her eyes puffy from crying. Dan, can I come in? I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. Why? She exhaled, shaking her head. I need to talk to you. I didn't move. We already talked. Not like this. I thought about slamming the door in her face. God knows she deserved it. But some small part of me, the part that had spent 15 years loving her, the part that still saw her as the mother of my children, wanted to hear what she had to say. So I stepped aside. She walked in hesitantly, as if she wasn't sure she was allowed anymore. She wasn't. I led her to the kitchen table, the same place we had sat the night I confronted her. The same table where she had lied to my face. I sat across from her. Talk. She swallowed. I don't know how it got this far. I scoffed. You don't? She shook her head. I mean, I do. I know I made mistakes. But I didn't think it would destroy everything. I leaned forward. Laura, you didn't make a mistake. You made a series of choices. And those choices destroyed everything. Not me. She flinched, but I wasn't done. You lied to me for months. You slept with another man behind my back. And now you have the nerve to sit here and say you don't know how it got this far? I laughed bitterly. Tell me, Laura, what did you think was going to happen? She wiped her eyes. I thought maybe you'd forgive me. I stared at her. Why? Her lip trembled. Because I still love you. I closed my eyes for a moment, exhaling through my nose. Once upon a time, hearing those words would have meant everything to me. Now, they meant nothing. I opened my eyes and met hers. You don't love me, Laura. If you did, we wouldn't be sitting here right now. She reached across the table, but I pulled back. Her voice cracked. Dan, please. We built a life together. No, I said, my voice firm. I built a life. You tore it apart. She broke down, sobbing into her hands. And for the first time in weeks, I felt nothing. No anger. No sadness. Just indifference. I stood up. You should go. She looked up, startled. Dan. I said you should go. Her shoulders shook as she stood. She lingered for a moment, searching my face for something, anything, but there was nothing left to find. She turned and walked to the door. Before she stepped outside, she whispered, I'm so sorry. I didn't respond. I just closed the door behind her. And just like that, she was gone. For good. James' downfall. A week later, I got a message from Megan. You're gonna want to see this. Attached was a screenshot, an office-wide email from James' company. James Whitmore has been terminated, effective immediately. We do not tolerate workplace misconduct of any kind. I smirked. Guess my little meeting with him had worked. I had sent everything, his emails with Laura, the texts, the hotel receipts, to his company's HR department. I didn't even have to explain. They saw what kind of man he was and handled the rest. I heard through the grapevine that his career was dead. No one wanted to work with a guy who couldn't keep it in his pants. Couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. A father first. The hardest part of all of this was the kids. Telling Mason and Ella that their mother and I were divorcing was the most painful conversation I had ever had. I didn't tell them the full truth, not yet. They were too young. I just told them that Mom and Dad weren't going to live together anymore. That we both loved them very much. That no matter what, they would always come first. Ella cried. Mason, being older, just nodded quietly. I knew he understood more than he let on. And that broke me. But I refused to let Laura's choices define their future. I was going to be the best damn father I could be. Closure. The divorce was finalized 3 months later. Laura lost the house. She got shared custody, but the kids stayed with me most of the time. James was gone from her life. He had tried to reach out, but she had been too humiliated to respond. And me? I had moved on. Not to someone else, not yet. I wasn't ready. But I had peace. I had my kids. I had my dignity. And I had my freedom. Laura had made her choices. And I had made mine. In the end, I didn't need revenge. Because watching her lose everything? That was justice enough. Epilogue: A New Beginning. One evening, months later, I was sitting on the porch watching the sunset when Mason came outside. He sat next to me, quiet for a while. Then he said, Dad, are you happy? I looked at him. What do you mean? I mean, after everything. He kicked at the porch steps. Do you think you'll ever be happy again? I thought about it. And then I smiled. Yeah, Bud, I said. I think I already am. He nodded, satisfied. And for the first time in a long time. I meant it. Divorce doesn't end when the papers are signed. It lingers. In the quiet moments. In the empty spaces where love used to live. In the way the house feels too big, too hollow, when the kids aren't home. For a while, I thought maybe I'd never move on. That Laura's betrayal would haunt me forever, that the bitterness would settle inside me like a permanent weight. But life doesn't stop. It just changes. And so did I. Adjusting to the new normal. The first few months after the divorce were the hardest. Not because I missed Laura, I didn't. But because I had to relearn how to live without her. At first, it was the little things. Like how I'd still set the table for 4, forgetting that Laura wasn't coming home. Or how I'd roll over in bed, instinctively reaching for her, only to find cold sheets. Nights were the worst. When the kids were with her, the house felt wrong. Too empty. Too silent. I'd stay up too late, drinking whiskey and watching mindless TV, just to avoid going to bed alone. But the loneliness didn't kill me. It just reminded me. Reminded me that I was free. Reminded me that I had survived. And that maybe, just maybe, something better was waiting for me on the other side. Laura's fall from grace. I didn't check in on Laura. Didn't ask how she was doing. Didn't care. But word got around. Megan told me that she had moved into a tiny apartment across town. Nothing fancy. Nothing like the home we had built together. James? Gone. Apparently, after I destroyed his career, he had tried to get back with her. But Laura, in all her glorious irony, had refused. He wasn't worth it, she had told Megan. I laughed when I heard that. Oh, now he wasn't worth it? Funny how people only realize their mistakes when it's too damn late. But the real kicker? She had tried to date again. Tried to rebuild her life. Tried to pretend she was the victim in all of this. But cheating leaves a stain. And in a town as small as ours, people talk. She had lost everything. Her marriage. Her home. Her reputation. And while I wasn't the type to revel in someone else's misery, I won't lie. It felt damn good knowing she finally understood what it felt like to be discarded. Fatherhood first. If there was one thing I was grateful for, it was the kids. Mason and Ella were my everything. At first, they struggled with the divorce. Mason, being older, tried to act tough, but I knew it ate at him. Ella, still young, cried a lot in the beginning. But over time, things settled. We built new traditions, just the three of us. Friday night movie marathons. Saturday morning pancakes. Sunday hikes in the park. And I made damn sure they never felt like they were missing anything. When they were with me, they had love. They had security. They had a father who would never, ever betray them. Laura tried to stay involved. But Mason barely spoke to her. Ella, bless her heart, still loved her mother. But I could see the distance growing between them. One night, Mason said something that stuck with me. She chose him over us. I didn't correct him. Because deep down, we both knew he was right. A second chance. I didn't date for a long time. Not because I couldn't. But because I wasn't ready. I wasn't going to be one of those guys who jumped into something just to fill the void. But life has a funny way of surprising you. It happened on a random Wednesday. I had stopped at a bookstore to pick up a novel for Ella. While browsing, I bumped into someone literally. She was holding a stack of books, and they went flying. "Oh, shit, I'm sorry," I said, bending down to help. She laughed, brushing her hair out of her face. "It's okay. I have a bad habit of carrying too much." She was beautiful. Not in the over-the-top way, but in a natural, effortless way. She looked real. We started talking. Her name was Emma. She was a teacher, recently divorced. And before I knew it, I was smiling a real, genuine smile. For the first time in years, I felt something. Not just anger. Not just bitterness. Something new. Something hopeful. Closure. A few weeks later, Laura called. I almost didn't answer. But some part of me wanted to see what she had to say. Her voice was quiet. "Dan, can we meet?" I hesitated. "Why?" She sighed. I need to talk to you. Please." Against my better judgment, I agreed. We met at a small cafe. She looked different. Older. Sadder. Like someone who had finally realized the weight of her own mistakes. She stirred her coffee, avoiding my eyes. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I nodded. You've said that before. I know. She exhaled shakily. But I don't think I ever really meant it before. I didn't say anything. She finally looked up at me. Do you hate me? I took a sip of my coffee. Thought about it. No, I said finally. I don't hate you. Her eyes glistened. I miss you. I sighed. Laura, we can't do this. I know, she whispered. And for the first time, I think she really did. She reached across the table, but this time, I didn't pull away. Not because I wanted her back. But because, for the first time, I felt nothing. Not anger. Not love. Just peace. I let go of her hand and stood up. Goodbye, Laura. She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. Goodbye, Dan. And just like that, the past was behind me. Forever. The future. It's been 2 years since the divorce. Mason is 16 now, taller than me, stronger than he knows. Ella is 13, is sweet, kind, full of life. And me? I'm happy. Emma and I are still together. It's not the whirlwind romance I had with Laura. But it's real. It's steady. It's honest. And that's all I ever wanted. One evening, Mason and I were sitting on the porch. He turned to me and asked, Dad, do you ever think about the past? I smiled. Sometimes. But does it still hurt? I looked out at the sunset, feeling light for the first time in years. No, I said. Not anymore. He nodded, satisfied. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, I realized something. Laura's betrayal hadn't broken me. It had freed me. And finally, after everything, I was whole again.